Well, a hearty shalom to you. Jeffrey Seif here once again. So glad that you opened up your world to enter into the biblical world. I just kicked off a new semester at King's University, and a student came up to me and said, "Hey, listen, just to let you know, I actually follow you online vis-a-vis these weekly little blurbs," and I was pleased by that. Furthermore, pleasantly surprised was I when a student from China was talking. We went around and people introduced themselves, and he was holding up this Bible. And so I asked him, after he talked, I says, where did he get that Bible? And I was so pleased to be able to say that I participated in the development of it. And I think those in the class were like, wow, and well, anyways, I'm going to read from this. I have different Tree of Life versions of the Bible. I like this one because it has all the artwork in it. It's a little more expensive than the others, but it helps support the Tree of Life Bible Society. Thank you for your support. We're looking at Parashat Shoftim. We're picking up in the 16th chapter, verse 18, where there's a mandate to appoint various judges. This is construed to be particularly important because we are entering a world where, religious leaders served with juridical powers. We're not used to that today because ministers have a power to suggest a course of action. Here, ministers were invested with juridical authorization to make binding legal decisions, assessments and decisions, and prudent they must be in the way they investigate issues and the way they decide on them. Ethics is extremely important. The Hebrew Bible is concerned with rites, R-I-T-E-S, that is ritual. It's also concerned with rights, R-I-G-H-T-S, and that is ethics, individuals doing right. Principal among those who adjudicate is the king, and so in the 17th chapter, which is where I want to land, there's an instruction here, picking up in verse 14 and going on through the end of the chapter, where there is an imperative for a king to be involved in the manufacture of biblical text, of the Torah, where it's explicit that he must have his own copy and read from it. I want to read from it, in fact, in verse 18. Now, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself a copy of the Torah on a scroll, from which is before the Levitical Kohanim, the priests. It will remain with him, and he will read in it all the days of his life, in order to learn to fear Adonai his God, and keep all the words of this Torah and these statutes. Very interesting, it seems to me. Then we're told in verse 20, his heart will not be exalted above his brothers, and he will not turn from the commandments to the right or to the left, so that he may prolong his days in his kingship, he and his sons, in the midst of Israel. Now, what's interesting is when you look at the story of the various kings of Israel, many of them did not prolong their days in their kingship. They were cut very short, very, very short on occasion. And why is that? Over and again in the biblical text we're informed that they cast the Torah behind their backs. They were non-compliant. Here, kings, the quintessential, the ultimate magistrate, the ultimate judge, was to make his own copy and spend time in it, be familiar with it, in order that it might temper impulses. That is specifically noted is that his heart will not be elevated amongst his brethren. Well, you might say, well, look, I'm not a king, and I don't read this and understand myself that I need to handwrite a copy of the Bible or have someone do it for me and then read it to me. This is obviously talking about someone else. Well, you're right at one level, but at another level you're not. And by that I mean, what's the principle? Let me ask you a question in beginning to explore that. How do you keep religious memory alive in your mind? As you make your journey through life, away from your computer right now, you can be assaulted by all kinds of stimuli, all kinds of lusts and passions and angers and feelings and all the rest. How do you keep the genie in the bottle? How do you keep that in check? Well, there are different things people do in order to cultivate religious faith and virtue. Well, when they drive about, they'll listen to religious music, the faith-building music. They'll listen to biblical texts in the radio. They'll listen to sermonizing in the radio. They'll do that. People will go to their house and, have inspirational music playing. They'll have religious books. They'll watch religious television. I worked in Christian television for years. Individuals will want to kind of fire up the screen and hear something that's faith-building. Similarly, individuals have Bibles, and people will begin the day with reading a text and so forth. All this is to keep the memory, keep the biblical energy alive in our frontal cortex, lest we forget and drift and be bested by the darker sides of our own natures. Well, what do we do in a world before religious television, religious radio, and the printing press? The average king doesn't have that, but his job is very important, and it was important for him to have his own copy of the Bible. His own, a kind of ownership in the manuscript. I know what it's like too. You can use the Bible, I underline and all the rest, and then when it gets old, when it's time to give it up, it's hard to do that because I have an emotional relationship with the text. It's not the Bible, it's not a Bible, it's my Bible, it's personal, because I spent time in it and my faith is kind of wrapped around with it. And it's kind of hard to disconnect, but there's a kind of ownership. I'm not just reading from a book, I'm reading from mine. And I mention that because it was felt important, it was mandated that the king needed to have his own copy of the text and spend time in it in order that his inner self will be impacted by it, with the net result it'll affect the way that he interacts with the world. You might not be a king. You might not need to, handwrite a copy of your own Bible, but you need to let yourself not be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewal of the mind, which is what this is talking about here. You've heard me to say every day when you look at me and hear me give a talk on this subject, while it is true that I come to you under the auspices of the Tree of Life Bible Society, and while it is true that I'm game to commend this version of the Bible because I had some leadership hand in the manufacture of it, while that's true, you've heard me to say I'm glad you read the Bible in any version, simply because you will be the better for it, because you, like me, aren't just, the Holy Spirit walking around. You have this fleshly earth suit that you live in. And that side of our experience can get bested by the darker side of human nature. We need to keep that at bay. And, the Bible today keeps the devil away. We got to keep up that faith and keep cultivating it. And to have our head and heart in the Word contributes to it. That is one of the points in Shoftim. One of the problems with being a Bible teacher like this is there's so much to get into, and I just pick where I want to land, and I wanted to give you that reminder today. Well, as I said at the outset, good to see you. Thanks for going on the journey, and let's do this again next week. God bless.